Continuing, council met early this evening and closed to discuss potential leases of land, a legal opinion regarding a settlement offer, and a confidential verbal update regarding a governance matter, and staff were provided with direction. We will now rise from closed session. Councillor Earnshaw, you have the motion. Could you please read it?
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Ermetta that council rise from closed session and reconvene in open session at 6:49 p.m.
Thank you. I'll ask the clerk to call for the vote.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
Please note that the City of Cambridge council meetings are broadcast on the city's YouTube page and archived on the city's website. It is imperative that we as City Council promote public participation using a variety of methods, including YouTube. On that note, our last council meeting had 199 views on YouTube. And I would like to point out that we also have rules of engagement during council meetings. I ask that you be respectful while others are speaking, refrain from any demonstrations, and I encourage you to actively listen to others. For staff and delegates alike, please be sure that you stand 6 to 8 inches from the microphone at the presenter's podium for optimal sound quality. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers using the nearest exit staircase. If you require assistance, please see our clerk's staff and they will provide you with support to exit the facility. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather outside of City Hall in the Farmers Market parking lot and await further instructions. Now I'd like to introduce council. Councillor Kimpson. Councillor Devine sends his regrets. Councillor Earnshaw. Councillor Roberts. Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Cooper, and Councillor Ermetta. And a special thanks to our clerks and technology services staff who are assisting with logistics for this evening. We will now sing the national anthem. If you are able, please rise and follow along. We embrace our shared responsibility with the Indigenous peoples to take care of this earth and its creatures. We can only do so by walking the path as partners stewarding this land, as we have been given the duty together to live in balance and harmony with all living things. We acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples who came before us and who we live amongst. By honoring this truth of past and present, may we come to true reconciliation through listening, reflecting, and learning. A reminder to members of council that the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act requires council members to declare any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to a matter under consideration. Are there any declarations this evening? Seeing none. Before we continue with our regular agenda, we have Katie Watson from the Rotary Club of Cambridge, Preston Hessler, with us to speak on the Rotary Club's request to install a peace pole, not a police pole. Welcome, Katie.
I am Katie from the Rotary Club of Cambridge, Preston Hessler. We like to install a peace pole. Peace poles are an iconic symbol of May Peace Prevail on Earth International, founded in Japan over 50 years ago. There's estimated 250,000 peace poles around the world, and we would like to put Cambridge on the map. The peace pole is 5 feet by 4 inches by 4 inches deep, and to install the pole, we need to dig 1 foot deep hole, fill with cement, and place a pole in the cement. We would like to install the peace pole at the end of Hammett Street in Hessler, right after the Our Lady of Fatima School. There's a pathway there with a bench, with a rotary bench that we would like to install the pole there. Thank you.
Does council have any comments or questions from this? Okay. Just waiting for the correct motion here. It's not this one.
Oh,
So Councillor Earnshaw, you have the motion. Could you please put it on the floor?
The motion, thank you, Mayor Liggett, but I require a seconder. Councillor Kimson will second the motion. So it's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Kimson that council supports the Rotary Club of Cambridge's request to erect a peace pole on city property by the Rotary Club of Cambridge's bench on the pathway at the end of Hammett Street, past Our Lady of Fatima Catholic Elementary School, in coordination with operations staff, and that staff be directed to enter into a maintenance agreement with the Rotary Club.
Thank you, Councillor Earnshaw. Do we have any questions or comments from council? None? Okay. I'll ask clerk to call for the vote.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
So our first item for consideration is the consent agenda. Councillor Hamilton, you have that motion. Could you please read it?
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Earnshaw. The recommendation that all items listed under the heading of consent agenda for September 12th, 2023 be adopted as recommended. 8.1, special council meeting minutes, August 17th, 2023. 8.2, council workshop minutes, August 17th, 2023. 8.3, council meeting minutes, August 29th, 2023. 8.4, council information package, September 1st, 2023. 8.5, 23-297-CD, exemption from part lot control, Lidstone Street and Gledhill Crescent.
Thank you. I will ask the clerk to call for the vote now.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
We will now move into consideration of reports, and our first agenda item is Report 23-041-CRE 2024 to 2026 Strategic Plan Key Components, and we have a presentation from Jenna Brown-Jowd, our Director of Corporate Strategy. Welcome, Jenna.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the community, and staff. I'm Jenna Brown-Jawa, Director of Corporate Strategy. I'm pleased to be here tonight to present an update on the development of the 24 to 26 strategic plan and also to ask for Council's endorsement on the key components of the plan. Next slide, please. We want to start with providing you an update on the progress of the development of the plan. So as you can see from the roadmap in front of you, we have provided a timeline for the development of the plan. So the plan development is considered over the course of the year. You'll see key phases as well as key milestones on the roadmap. Everything on the left-hand side in gold text are items that we've completed to date. So some of those major items that we have completed at this time include looking at the progress of our current plan and the status of how far we've gotten and what we have left to achieve. You'll see that we've updated the scope of the plan, and we've had conversations around what that update entails. We've done some work around a longer range business plan, which of course is the action of our strategic plan and how we're going to achieve it. And we've also had some conversations with Council through workshops as well as focus groups to look at the key components of that plan. At this time, we've also done some work under phase 2, number 5, engaging staff in how we will educate and launch the plan and developing some tools and templates. And we do have some work left to do. As you can see from the roadmap, we are on track to deliver and come to Council to receive approval in January of 2024 with our launch, implementation, and education beginning in February of 2024. Next slide, please. So in terms of the background, we wanted to give you a little bit of an update in terms of the work that's happened to date. So there's been a lot of work that has gone into developing our key components that we're presenting tonight. So in terms of the work that's happened, we have done a council workshop, which was held in June. And so some of the recommendations following that workshop, we're doing some edits related to our goals, objectives, and strategic actions. And those edits were done to enhance, to add clarity, and to make sure that we reflect internal and external environmental changes in the language that we have. In addition to this, we've developed a vision description. So of course we have a vision as the city, but we wanted to add some more context and explain to the public what we really hope to achieve in those 4 years. And so our broader vision description that you'll see in Appendix A helps us to articulate that. We've also done some work to update our value behavior descriptions, and our value behavior descriptions were developed, of course, to provide examples of how we demonstrate our values in the interactions that we have with one another. In addition, we held 3 additional council focus group sessions to really look at the key components and continue to evaluate that language and do some refinements. And we're very pleased. We've had very engaged, informative sessions and some really thoughtful feedback from council that has been incorporated into Appendix A, which you received in conjunction with the report this evening. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of why we're asking for the endorsement tonight and why it's important, just to give you some context around what we mean by the key components. So the key components of our plan are our mission, vision, values, vision description, value behavior descriptions, and the goals, objectives, and actions. And so that's what you see contained in Appendix A. Obtaining council's endorsement of the key components will confirm the final content and enable important implementation work to continue. So we have to have an understanding and a finalization of those elements to take us down the path towards our next deliverables. So that work will involve the development of a new strategic plan document, as well as some visual aids and a strategy on a page. It will also include, as I mentioned before, launch education and communication materials material that will help us support our rollout and will help us inform, enable, and help with that reinforcement and adoption from staff and community. And we'll also be developing a reporting framework, which will help us measure the plan and make sure that we're actually achieving what we set out to achieve. Next slide, please. So in terms of the next steps, just going back to that roadmap, we are in the process of hiring a consultant to help assist us with the development of that measurement framework. So again, that's going to help us define what does success look like with this new plan and how are we going to measure it and how are we going to report on it and be transparent with our community, with staff, and with council, and continuing to enhance the way that we do that. Ongoing staff engagement will continue as we develop those tools to help with the education and launch and the enablement of our plan. And we'll also be doing some significant implementation planning and a communication strategy development. I'm happy to take any questions that council has.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, any comments? Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you, Mayor Liggett, and through you, and thank you so much for all the work that you've done putting this together. It's an exciting plan, and we know how much thought and effort have gone into it from yourself and staff. So first off, thank you.
Thank you.
I guess the comment that I have is that there's one small concern, which is in the promote and develop more transportation options section. There was a line that was removed from the initial draft, and that had to do with preparing for and supporting for the LRT and related development. And I know later on we left in GO Train. And so I think when we're talking about a strategic plan as the future of the city and a vision that we all want to aspire to reach, for me, the LRT is something that is a precursor to things like the GO Train, if we're going to include that. I think the LRT would typically come first. It ties the whole city together, and something that I think we can all get excited about, regardless of age, background, location in the city. It benefits everyone. So what I was hoping to do is actually propose an amendment to this motion, which would be to have, and the council directs staff to add or return.
Councillor Hamilton, we need the motion on the floor before we can do amendments.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Councillor Coop, does anybody else have any comments? Any questions of staff? Okay, thank you, Jenna.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, Councillor Cooper, you have the motion. Could you please put it on the floor?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jan. This is moved by me, and I'm on the right one, right? It's moved by me, seconded by Councillor Mehta, that report 23-041, 2024 to 2026 strategic plan key components be received, and that council endorse the key components of the strategic plan as presented in 23-041-CRE Appendix A, Draft 2024-2026 Strategic Plan Key Component Content.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments on that? This is where you want your amendment on the floor. Okay, we're going to take a short break before we do that. Okay. So we worked on the wording of an amendment that Counselor Hamilton is going to put on the floor and go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett, and through you. Apologies for jumping the gun earlier. Almost back at 100%, but not quite there yet. But the amendment I would like to propose is that, and that council directs staff to add preparing for the possibility of the LRT and related development. Just to have that line added. It's slightly different than the original line. But regardless of if you are in favor or not, you're preparing for the possibility. So that's it. Sure. So my amendment would be along the lines of, and this might need to be wordsmithed by the clerk, and that council directs staff to add preparing for the possibility of the LRT and related development to the promote and develop more transportation options segment of the strategic plan.
Okay, any comments or questions on the amendment? Councillor Kimpson.
Thank you, Mayor Jan, and through you. If we look under the goals and objectives, which is on page 83, under prosperity, it notes getting around, and it states emphasize connectivity and active transportation choices to help people travel in and beyond the city through various modes of transportation. Doesn't that already cover potentially the LRT with that as a various mode of transportation?
I would say that it does, but maybe Jenna would like to speak to that. Or did Jenna go? Is that what that statement is meant to, for the future potential of any different type of transportation?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Liggett. That is intended to inform all types of transportation, including the possibility of the LRT.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Mehta?
And through you, I'm quite comfortable with the current wording of what staff had put forward. I believe it takes into consideration all forms of transportation. And the LRT is a divisive issue in my ward. The majority are opposed to the LRT. I ran in 4 elections, so I have a good indication of where my ward stands, and they would not want this wording added. I think if we're trying to appeal to all opinions, the existing wording covers it. And I would be opposed to changing the wording, so I'll be voting against the amendment. My constituents have made it very clear to me. Thank you.
Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you, Mayor Liggett, through you. And I appreciate the comments from everyone around the horseshoe. I really appreciate hearing your perspectives. And thank you, Councillor Kimpson, for pointing out the transportation options on page 83. I think my concern with that is that getting around could mean literally anything. It could be a scooter, it could be a bike, it could be a hovercraft, for all we know. While we know the LRT is concrete, it's in front of our face. I work in Waterloo. It literally travels past my face every single day. And so I think if we're looking at the vision of the city, it's incumbent upon us to place this somewhere in the document. And I think the wording of prepare for the possibility of covers us, whether you're for it or against it, you should at least prepare for that possibility. And keep in mind, we do have existing wording in this, the GO train, preparing for GO transit seems to me in some ways even more farther removed than an LRT. So that wording remains. I have no issue with it because it's an aspirational vision document. So I have no problem with the GO train, and I have no problem preparing for the possibility of the LRT as well. Thank you.
Councillor Kimpson.
Thank you, Mayor Jan. Sorry, I should have asked this earlier. My apologies, Jenna. Do we have the option as we work through the sort of the development roadmap, do we have the option of adding to the document as we go along when we know a little bit more about the route, if it's going to be the one that we're familiar with going into Galt, or if it is somehow going to get changed or tweaked otherwise? Is that something we could do?
So through you, Mayor Liggett, can I just ask for clarification, Councillor Kimpson, that you mean add, like change the wording of the description of our strategic actions? Is that what your question is referring to?
I guess, wondering if it's something that, for whatever reason, we don't support the amendment today to specifically add the wording to prepare for the possibility, could we as a council at a later date, add it into the document that we wish to, prepare for the LRT or advocate for the LRT or something like that? Or is it a one and done tonight sort of thing?
Through you, Mayor Liggett. So I appreciate that question. I think in terms of what my recommendation would be, we want to try to finalize these components because, again, there are some dependencies on the wording and the language, right, in terms of how we're going to measure the plan and those kinds of pieces and in terms of the plan itself. However, that being said, one of the things that I'd like to propose going forward is that we do a comprehensive review every year to look at the do an environmental scan, look at our environment and what's changed. Of course, there'll be things that will come up along the way that we can't be aware of now, that will happen, that will impact our priorities. And so we can look at that, I would recommend on a yearly basis and make any required changes at that time. And so that's a common practice with strategic planning, that we do a comprehensive environmental scan every year and talk about any of those other changes that may need to be included.
Thank you.
Councillor Armetta.
Well, thank you, Mayor Jan. I'm certainly supportive of the wording that staff have. I'm going to be leaving it at that. One other thing I like about this wording as well is if a better technology comes forward, we have the option to adjust to that. And I believe the LRT is an outdated technology, and I believe more and more people are finding that out. And if something better comes along, we have that option. And my constituents are strong supporters of the GO train. Most of them work in the Greater Toronto area, not to the west, and they would rather have better GO transit along the Cambridge to Toronto corridor. And I am fairly confident that can be done sooner than the LRT. So I'm supporting the current wording, not the amendment. I'll be voting against the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Earnshaw.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. I don't know if Councillor Hamilton has a seconder yet for his motion to amend, but I'm prepared to second it. Like Councillor Armetta, I have been talking with people in my ward, which of course is the downtown Galt ward, Ward 4, and includes the membership of the business improvement area. I also sit on that board, and as such, I'm fully aware that its membership is strongly in favor of the LRT. Having heard what Jenna has told us about the desire to finalize the document, I am concerned that it be finalized with the vague wording that may cover the LRT and not specifically address the LRT. I might add as well that some of my other constituents, unlike Councillor Armetta's, and I recognize it's a different geographical area and therefore has a perhaps different perspective, have individually communicated with me by email to indicate their strong support for the LRT. And so I will vote in favor of the amendment so that the LRT is specifically mentioned, albeit as a mere possibility, which I think protects us from, as Councillor Hamilton has stated, whether it goes one way or the other. Thank you.
Okay, any more comments or questions? And you understand that where that goes, or do you need the clerk to put that up again? You're good? Okay, Councillor Kimson.
Can I just get the clerk to read back where it would go and where it would fit in specifically, if we don't mind?
So the amendment falls under promote and develop more transportation options, which is under strategic actions, collaborate. In your council agenda, it's page 80. It's the bottom of page 85. You want me to read them? Would you like me to read it?
Don't mind. I'm just wondering exactly where it would go in here.
Okay. So under strategic actions, collaborate, promote and develop more transportation options. The paragraph would change to, is proposed to change to, that staff be directed to add. Following this action focuses on initiatives that enhance transit systems and increase transportation options, including preparing for the possibility of the LRT and related development. That paragraph then goes on to talk about enhancing and connecting multi-use trails, investing in cycling infrastructure, improving walkability in and between the downtowns and community hubs, and advocating and preparing for GO Transit.
Councillor Kimpson.
Sorry, I was just saying thank you.
Okay, we'll call for the vote.
Starting voting on the amendment. Closing voting. And that carries with a vote of 5-2.
Okay, so now we'll vote on the main motion. And who has the main motion? Councillor Cooper, you have the main motion? Could
Okay. Okay, so
main motion as amended,
just the main one? I don't have
as
anything.
amended.
I don't have that. I've got the main one here. If the clerk has it, I'm quite happy for her to read it.
She's just gonna draft that.
Okay.
Change for you.
No problem. I'm ready when you are.
Could you just read the motion as amended? So just read the main motion. And it'll be as amended. It'll be recorded as amended.
Yeah, I'll just read it as it is here.
Mhm.
Okay, this is moved by me, seconded by Councillor Mehta. That report 23041, 2024 to 2026 strategic plan key components be received. And the council endorse the key components of the strategic plan as presented in 23-041-CRE Appendix A, draft 2024 to 2026 strategic plan key component content. As amended.
Thank you, and I'll ask the clerk to call for the vote now.
Opening voting. And closing voting. And that carries 6-1.
Our next report is 23-197-CD-499 Dundas Street North Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment Recommendation Report. And we have Andrea Sinclair from MHBC Planning with us to provide a presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. We did provide a presentation to clerks. I'm assuming that'll be loaded. Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor, Council, and those members of the public here today and watching at home. My name's Andrea Sinclair. I'm a partner with MHPC Planning. I'm joined here today with representatives from Roman Homes Builders, the owners of this property. We are here to talk about and in support of staff's recommendation for 499 Dundas Street North. Next slide, please. This matter was to a public meeting about, I think, almost exactly a year ago today to council. We're very excited to finally be here for a decision. It was a very positive meeting. The property is located on Dundas Street. It's currently been used or previously been used as a fast food restaurant. It's within the city's reurbanization area and along an existing transit route. There are a number of services in the area that would support this type of multiple residential development. If you can go to the next slide. And I'll downplay the fact that this is within phase 2 of the ION based on the last discussion, but there is existing bus transit in the area. This figure identifies all of the existing bus stations as well. This includes the Delta I Express right at the intersection of Hespeler and Dundas. So that is all transit that is already available today, including a stop that's literally adjacent to the site. If stage 2 of ION does go as currently proposed, this site would also be within a major transit station area associated with the Delta station. Next slide, please. In terms of the proposal, it's for a 6-story multiple residential building with a total of 60 units. We are proposing a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. I did want to note, often in these types of development, we're seeing a lot of heavy weighting towards 1 bedroom. In this case, we actually have more 2 bedrooms than 1 bedrooms. That's in an attempt to make sure there's units available for small families or those with an increase of people working from home. We're thinking, we find there is a need for more 2-bedroom units in the marketplace. We have all parking is structured. There's a level of underground, and then there's also parking within the ground floor of the building that's been architecturally screened from the street. We have bicycle parking that exceeds the current standards of the city. And just on that note, when we were at the public meeting, I know there was comments from council in terms of in support of the parking reduction, whether or not more bicycle parking could be provided. So we have increased the bicycle parking from what we were originally proposing. So we're now exceeding the current standard, which would only be 18 indoor secure parking stalls for bikes. We now have 33. We've also been able to reconfigure the parking to get more tandem spaces. While those don't count towards the zoning requirement, practically speaking, for the 2-bedroom units, it does allow people to have 2 parking stalls that they can use. So we've also increased those spaces by an additional 6 for a total of 16 tandem spaces. There is, and we'll get to additional renderings showing the rooftop amenity area, and access to the parking will be from the side streets of Jarvis and Easton Street. Next slide, please. I won't go through this in great detail, but just to say that this proposal is fully consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the growth plan. This represents intensification in a built-up area and an identified intensification area within the city's official plan. Next slide, please. It's within the built-up area of the region's official plan, and both in the region and the city's official plan, there is an emphasis on providing a significant amount of housing within the existing built-up areas. Because it's a built-up area, that means services, transit, all of these things are in place already, and we're building upon that existing infrastructure. Next slide, please. Currently, the site is designated business industrial, but as I mentioned, it's within a regeneration area within the official plan. So those are areas that, while have traditionally been used for either industrial or commercial, the expectation is that over the course of the time frame of the plan, they will transition to other uses such as higher density residential, mixed use, things like that. So there is alignment with the official plan in terms of this proposal. The regeneration areas are permitted at a height of 8 stories. We're under that maximum height at a height of 6 stories, but do need an increase in the FSR, which is the sort of built form above the site. Next slide, please. This just illustrates, and sorry, it's a little hard to read on the screen, but what is the current use of the property, which again has been a single-story fast food restaurant, and the proposed use, which we feel is a much better use of the property, especially given its location along transit as a 6-story multiple residential building. This is going to represent infill of what is currently an underutilized property that's going to introduce greater housing options to the area. It's going to support the intensification targets of the region of the city. It's going to support existing transit and public services, provide for a mix of unit sizes, and support affordable housing initiatives through an affordable housing contribution. So council may recall a few months ago, Roman Homes put forward a proposal for Liberty and Mill Street, which was approved by council. This is the same developer. For that project, they committed to an affordable housing contribution, and they've committed to that similar contribution for this project as well. So for both of their projects, being the first projects they've done within the city, and we're excited to continue working to bring this great project to the city. Next slide, please. In terms of, and I've touched on this a little bit already, improvements to the original proposal. As I mentioned, we had actually a very positive public meeting, but there were some comments that we wanted to take a further look at, one being the ability to increase bicycle parking, which we have done. Also being able to increase the tandems parking spaces, again, which we've done. And then there was comments about sort of amenity space and making sure that's appropriately screened from the residential neighborhood to the north. And there's some renderings in the package that shows how that's been addressed through the use of landscaped privacy walls for that rooftop terrace, so that there's no visibility from the rooftop into the abutting residential area to the north. Next slide. So this image shows we've added an amenity building to the roof that provides more indoor amenity space for residents. It's a very tight site, so it's challenging to have really ground floor amenity, and that's why we've addressed it at the rooftop. And then you can see along the north wall of the building, that privacy wall. It's been integrated in the planters, and that's again to focus all of the overlook of that amenity looking out over Dundas Street as opposed to looking out over the residential neighborhood to the north. Next slide. As part of the rooftop amenity, we're looking at things like the ability to have greenhouse, or ability for residents to potentially grow their own food, grow their own gardens. So this is just a rendering of showing what that might look like. Those details will be worked through the site plan process. Next slide. Just another rendering showing that rooftop amenity area. Knowing that it is a tight site, we wanted to ensure that there was going to be high quality amenity space for the residents. So there will be a combination of both indoor and this outdoor space. Next slide. I think this sort of just shows what we've already gone through, so you can move on that. In terms of consideration of comments, again, I've gone through a number of these already, but just to reiterate that we have added additional bicycle parking as well as additional tandem spaces. It's not noted on the slide, but I did want to let council know we're also going to be providing EV ready parking stalls. I know that's not a current zoning bylaw requirement, but it is the way it's going in the industry, and there's more and more people driving either electric or hybrid cars. So having those EV ready stalls is something we'll be working through with the city through site plan. Now, policy staff through their review noted about potentially going higher in height if we could provide affordable housing within the building. There's unfortunately so much uncertainty in the current market that we didn't know if we could have them within the project. That's why we're proposing the contribution. But there was also a few residents' concerns through circulation about the height already at 6 stories. So wanted to respect the existing neighborhood and not be going up in even more height. So in that case, we've left the height at 6 stories, which was the original proposal. It's also with each increase in height, if you go from 6, then you're almost going to 12 because of the offset cost of going higher. So there was a number of factors to look into. There was also a comment from council about whether or not the building could be terraced back and have some step backs of that top floor. Again, it's something we did look at. It just didn't work with the interior layout of the building and would have really had minimal difference in terms of shadows and things like that. But what we did do is concentrate on how we can make that rooftop amenity area more private and not impacting the surrounding residents. And then other technical comments are really more site plan level and are being worked through with staff and will continue to be worked through with staff as we go through that more detailed site plan process. Next slide. And that's it. I spoke quite quickly, so if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
We do have a lineup. Councillor Kimson?
Thank you, Mayor Jan, and I have a couple questions if that's okay. Sure. I noted in the report, it's talking about the required loading spaces and that one space is required, but there's actually going to be no loading spaces. And so I'm wondering, how is loading going to take place? And how's that going to affect people dropping off, picking up, et cetera, et cetera?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. So we can, again, it's something we'll be looking through with site plan. The loading spaces requirement of the current bylaw is because the current zoning is more commercial. So you have a lot of loading of trucks coming in, things like that. For the residential development, there will be limited times when there needs to be moving trucks and things like that. But we have the ability to do that within the parking in terms of either temporarily having some of the visitor spots or pulling into the garage otherwise. So it's just, there's not a dedicated loading stall that's there, all times of year for when like a commercial development would have. But in terms of drop off, pickup, things like that, we can have short-term parking. So if someone's say having a delivery made, there would be the ability to have those short-term parking within the overall parking design.
Okay, thank you. I'm just concerned about how it's such a busy corner and obviously it gets clogged up quite a lot. So I'm just concerned that if there's not adequate space provided for things like that, that it could really create a bottleneck. My next question is, what is the contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund going to be?
So what we proposed on Liberty, what we're proposing for this one as well is a 500 per unit, which I understand there's been sort of a range on other projects, and that seemed to be sort of consistent with some of the other projects we've been seeing within the city.
Certainly, if I may be so bold as to suggest that a generous contribution would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Cooper?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jan. Thanks for your presentation. You've got 60 units and 45 of them 2-bedroom. I just want to say hallelujah and thank you for realizing that there's actually families in this city that need more than one room and even need more than one car, which you've accommodated here. It's refreshing to see.
Thank you.
On that note, just the tandem spaces, you mentioned that I'm just curious about the numbers here. There's a total number of tandem spaces at 16. I'm just curious, is that 16 double? So there's actually 32 spaces or 8 doubles, so 16?
I believe it's 8 doubles of 16. So there's
16. Okay.
Oh, sorry, no, I misspoke. It's 16 total that are tandem spaces. So 16 that won't count for the bylaw, but are existing spaces so there will be 16 units that could have 2 cars, if you look at it that way.
Okay, yeah, again, thank you. I wish we could see more of that. We've actually have families in our city. So, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Roberts?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jan. Actually, the other councillors here have already asked all my questions, but I just want to say thank you. I did notice in the report that you're also including 15% accessible units in the building, which is wonderful. So I
At a minimum, yes.
Yeah, at the site plan stage, what that looks like. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Earnshaw?
Thank you, Mayor Liggett, and through you to Andrea. About these tandem spaces, I saw in the report somewhere, I was struggling to find it again, that they're unbundled. And I didn't know quite what that meant. Could you explain that for me, please?
Absolutely. And through you, Madam Mayor. So the unbundled is for sort of the remainder of the parking spaces, and unbundled really just means that if you're buying a unit, you're paying extra to get a parking space, because if you make it that the parking is just anyone can park there, you're not going to decrease that demand. So we want to make it sure that if you really need a spot, you're buying a spot with your unit, and that way the people who do not want to pay to have a car and want to take advantage of the bus and things like that, it's when you work through transportation demand management, that's the most effective way to reduce the demand on cars. So by not just having it a free for all of parking and saying, if you want the parking spot, you need to pay, you really limit. So yeah, that's really all it means. But with the tandem spaces, they really do have to be for the same unit, because otherwise you can imagine what a nightmare that would be.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Kimpson.
Thank you very much, Mayor Jan. And back again with some more questions. For the 2-bedroom units, obviously expecting families, which is great. Where are the nearest parks or areas where the kids can race around and play? Noted that we're limited to the rooftop amenity area. So I'm just sort of wondering where people with small energetic people will be spending their time.
Sure. And it might be that the context map in this presentation is probably too close of a zoom in. Actually, you can make it out a bit. If you go back in the slide, if that's okay, to, I think it's the second or third slide in the presentation, you do pick up, there are a number of parks that are within if you go until you get to the air photo would be great. Yeah, this one's fine. So you can see just along the Grand River, there is park associated with the school as well as the trails along the river. There's an additional park north of the site, and there's actually, and you can just make it out kind of near where the public school is by, if you follow Roxborough Road, there is a pedestrian connection over the tracks that gets to those parks to the north. So they are within sort of a 5 to an 8 minute walk, some existing parks, but we did, again, because they're not right on Dundas Street, wanted to make sure we were going to have amenity on the site as well. So there are existing park space, but they're not obviously immediately adjacent.
And my second question, if I may, and these are proposed to be condominium units, is that correct?
That is the intent, yes.
Thank you.
So I have a question. With the rooftop terrace, you're running water lines up there, right?
If we proceed with something like the greenhouses, and I think even to be able to have washrooms up in that amenity space, it would be serviced for water.
If you proceed, I thought you were going to put potential for residents to have vegetable gardens, potential greenhouse, but you were still going to do something like that. So you would need water lines up.
Correct. Yep. And that'll be all looked at through site plan. We just haven't gotten to that level of detail in the review with planning staff for site plan. But I don't see why staff wouldn't be supportive of that. So we would obviously have to make sure they can be watered.
Okay, thank you. I have an expectation that you will be putting water lines up there. So just want that up front right now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, there's no other questions or comments. Thank you so much. I have to say that I have seen some other properties that this developer has done, and that's high quality. And I think they'll probably do a really good job here as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we have Jacqueline. I think you're going to come up, are you, Jacqueline, and do something? Oh.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and all in attendance tonight. I'm Jacqueline Hanneman. I'm a senior planner with the city. I have been the city lead and contact for this project, working with Andrea and their team. So I'll just say a few words. I think Andrea did a pretty good job at going over the entire proposal. And I am recommending approval for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment at 499 Dundas Street North. Next slide, please. So just as a quick reminder, the proposal is a 6-story, 60-unit apartment building. The development is proposed within the city's built-up area and within a regeneration area. The property is close proximity to commercial and community uses, located on a major road with lots of access to public transportation. This is the type of infill redevelopment the city encourages and city's policy encourages and expects to see in this area. Next slide, please. Just a reminder that there is an official plan amendment with site specific to permit an apartment building on the property with an increased floor space index. Next slide, please. The zoning bylaw amendment is proposed with a number of site specifics. I just wanted to mention too that there is a holding provision that is requested on this site by the Region of Waterloo for the completion of a record in site condition. This is because they are moving to a more sensitive use from what was currently there, which is commercial use. So this is just a standard process that we would go through to ensure that if there was any need for site remediation before the development of the site, that would happen. So it's just sort of making sure that we can redevelop this site for residential uses. Next slide, please. Planning staff is recommending approval of this development. In staff's opinion, it's an appropriate development proposal for the location in the built-up area and the regeneration area with access to amenities and transit. It represents efficient use of land and has been identified by the province, region, and locally here at the city for intensification purposes. And they are located in close proximity to existing transit, existing community amenities, and represents good planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Earnshaw, you have the motion. Could you please read it?
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Roberts that report 23-197-CD 499 Dundas Street North official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment recommendation report be received. And that Cambridge Council adopts proposed official plan amendment number 62 to redesignate 499 Dundas Street North from the business industrial designation to the high density residential designation with site-specific policy 8.10.97 to permit a floor space index, or FSI, of up to 3.5, and that the adopted official plan amendment be submitted to the Regional Municipality of Waterloo for approval. And that Cambridge Council approves the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject lands from C2, section 3.3.3, to HRM3, section 4.1.440, to facilitate the development of the lands for a 6-story multiple residential development with 60 units. And that Cambridge Council is satisfied that the requirements for a public meeting in accordance with subsections 17, subsection 15, and 34, subsection 17 of the Planning Act have been met. And further, that the bylaws attached to report 23-197-CD be passed.
Thank you, Councillor Earnshaw. Are there any questions? Any comments? Seeing none, I'll ask for the clerk to put the vote on the floor. Oh, Councillor Mehta, slow.
Well, thank you, Mayor Jan. I just wanted to say that I am going to be voting in favor of this. I believe it checks off all the boxes, and we need more missing middle housing. And I believe that this is a great example of how it can be done. And it's a great template for a lot of other developers to follow. So I'm looking forward to seeing this project come to fruition and many more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. I agree with you 100% on that. And I'll ask clerk to put the motion on the floor. To put the vote on the floor.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
Our next report is 23-312 CD Blenheim Road Local Improvements Sanitary Servicing Extension Addendum. Councillor Roberts, you have the motion. Could you please read it?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jan. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Kimson. Recommendation that report 23-312 CD Blenheim Road Local Improvement Sanitary Servicing Extension Addendum be received. And that report 23-274 CD Blenheim Road Local Improvement Sanitary Servicing Extension included as Appendix B be received. And that council directs staff to notify impacted property owners of the city's intention to proceed with local improvement charges option 4 for the extension of municipal sanitary sewer on Blenheim Road in accordance with the Ontario Regulation 586/06. And further, that the bylaw included as Appendix A to Addendum Report 23-312 CD to amend the mandatory connection bylaw be approved. And if I could just speak to this. Thank you. I would just like to make a direction to staff that if we can have the repayment terms on this extended to 20 years, possibly to make this more manageable for residents, if that's possible. I believe that would be Hardy I would be connecting with. Thank you. Thank you, Hardy.
So we don't have to change anything on this? Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Any comments? Okay, I'll ask clerk to call for the vote.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
Our next report is 23-307 CD Recommendation Report Proposed Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment for Additional Residential Units. And Councillor Hamilton, you have the motion. Could you please read it?
Thank you, Mayor Liggett, and through you, it's moved by myself and it is seconded by Councillor Kimson. The recommendation that report 23-307 CD Recommendation Report Proposed Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment for Additional Residential Units be received, and that council adopts the official plan amendment, and that council approves the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and that council repeals bylaws 108-18 and 22-017, and further that the bylaws attached to report 23-307 CD be passed.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Any comments? Okay, I'll ask clerk to call for the vote.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
Okay, we will move on to other business. And does any member of council have any other business they wish to discuss? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor Jan. In July of 2019, council approved report 19/194 CD custom traffic warning signs that included a policy for the use of custom warning signs on city streets. The report and policy provided an outline on custom traffic warning signs and the nature of requests for such signs. In Ontario, the Ontario Traffic Manual, OTM, provides guidance on the use of traffic controls, pavement markings, and signs. Warning signs are intended to provide advance notice to drivers of unexpected and potentially dangerous conditions on or near the road. The policy approved by council only has one staff member noted as the authority to approve exceptions to custom warning signage. For continuity purposes, I would kindly request that council direct that staff update this policy to reflect that the deputy city manager or their designate be authorized to approve signage that may not meet the Ontario Traffic Manual guidelines, provided that the criteria outlined in the policy for custom warning signs are met to the satisfaction of the deputy city manager or their designate, and that no unnecessary risks are posed. And this request is to direct staff to make this update to the policy and remove the section on custom pedestrian advisory signage, please. Thank you.
Mr. Bromberg, are you comfortable with that direction?
Yeah, I'm very supportive and I think this is an excellent direction for us to carry out.
Okay, thank you. There you go. Okay, I would like to take a moment to just highlight that the week of September 18th to the 24th is Rail Safety Week in Ontario. Railway crossing and trespassing incidents continue to occur across our province. And there have been 66 fatalities and 43 avoidable serious injuries in 2022. Awareness programs like the Railway Safety Week ensure that education and public awareness is highlighted in our communities to ensure that our citizens understand the importance of safety when crossing railways. And we encourage Cambridge to please ensure pedestrians and motorists are looking and listening while near railways and obeying established traffic laws. So please stay safe, Cambridge. A few years back, I researched in the 1800s, what people had died from, and the fatalities, the highest incidents were from railway people being killed on railways. So it doesn't seem like anything has changed. And back then they didn't even have lights and switches and that sort of thing. I found it extremely interesting that despite the fatalities from fire and drownings, that more people died from railway accidents. So we have one motion this evening, which was introduced on August 29th council meeting, but we have two pre-registered delegations for this item. Members of the Family Violence Project Waterloo, Amy Hatchborn, Jennifer Hutton, Christine Taylor, and Lisa Aki. Are you going to come up together or? Oh, great. Okay, welcome. You have a presentation for slides?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, just hang on one second. You will have 5 minutes to address council.
As we're doing it together, could we request 10?
We have to vote on that because we don't. Can you do it in 5?
I will try my best.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Mayor Liggett and other honored councillors, we come before you today to request that you declare intimate partner violence an epidemic in the city of Cambridge. Slide 2. We are representatives of the Family Violence Project of Waterloo Region. I'm Jennifer Hutton, CEO of Women's Crisis Services, and I have with me Amy Hackborn, Staff Sergeant of the Waterloo Regional Intimate Partner Violence Unit, Christine Taylor, Manager of the Sexual Assault Domestic Violence Treatment Center of St. Mary's Hospital, and Lisa Aki, Director of Counseling for Camino Wellbeing and Mental Health. The Family Violence Project was launched in 2006 by 12 partner members who came together in collaboration, believing that more needed to be done to address intimate partner violence in our community. The Family Violence Project was the first of its kind in Canada, and 17 years later, here we are still committed to the reduction and prevention of intimate partner violence. Slide 3. We stand before you today regarding the deaths of Carol Collington, Anastasia Kuzak, and Natalie Warmington, who died on September 22nd, 2015 at the hands of the same intimate partner. As you may know, an inquest into these deaths was held in June of 2022 in Pembroke, Ontario. The inquest jury heard from many experts across the province and beyond, as well as witnesses who were involved in the events leading up to and on that day. It also heard from those working in the field of intimate partner violence, such as the Waterloo Regional Police Service, and most importantly, heard from intimate partner violence survivors. The testimony provided through the inquest was tragic, powerful, and informative. The jury returned 86 significant recommendations.
Next slide, please. We would like to paint a picture for you. The picture is a landscape that reveals the tragic history and nature of intimate partner violence in the city of Cambridge. Like every other community in Ontario and across Canada, intimate partner violence lives in the city. Each day, its harsh realities are brought to bear on its citizens. It destroys families, ruins lives and livelihoods, and causes trauma that can last a lifetime and extends beyond a generation. What does intimate partner violence look like in Cambridge? It is an important question, and we will answer it by sharing some key statistics from the last 10 years, so we all understand the magnitude of this issue in our community. From 2012 to 2022, the Waterloo Regional Police Service responded to 20,870 calls for service in Cambridge involving intimate partner violence. This is an average of over 2,080 calls per year and an average of almost 6 calls per day. The Waterloo Regional Police Service laid 11,020 charges involving intimate partner violence. This is an average of over 1,100 per year. 30% of all charges laid for intimate partner violence in Waterloo Region were laid in the city of Cambridge. 12 people in the city were victims of homicide, attempted homicide, and manslaughter. Serious charges for assaults, criminal harassment, strangulation, weapons offenses, and repeated breaches of court orders are laid almost daily by the Waterloo Regional Police Service.
Next slide, please. And this only highlights those whose struggles come to the attention of the police. Each year, countless women and children and men seek support from various social service agencies across the region. From the agencies we have here with us tonight, we have Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region, and from 2022 to 2023, 284 clients in Cambridge accessed their outreach program. 115 clients stayed at their Cambridge Haven House shelter, and 90 children stayed at their Cambridge Haven House shelter. Camino Wellbeing and Mental Health, who's also part of this delegation, along with the Counseling Collaborative, consistently supports more than 1,800 clients impacted by intimate partner violence each year. Since 2020, the request for counseling related to family and relationship conflict has increased dramatically. Family and relationship conflict is a precursor to intimate partner violence and is now the third most common reason that individuals, couples, and families seek counseling and support, only after anxiety and depression. It's estimated that 33% of incidents of intimate partner violence are witnessed by children and can have devastating consequences for their long-term mental health, emotional well-being, and can lead to the intergenerational cycle of violence. The Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Treatment Center of Waterloo Region is a program which responds to both St. Mary's Hospital in Kitchener and Cambridge Memorial Hospital emergency departments for cases of sexual assault, intimate partner violence, and human trafficking who present to emerge. So these statistics I'm speaking of represent both hospitals. So since 2023, our center observed a marked increase in the levels of violence and injury to victims of intimate partner violence who present to both hospitals. Prior to 2020, incidents in which women were assaulted with a weapon, strangled, or forcibly confined were not commonplace. But now we routinely see these cases in hospital and note a significant increase in the severity of intimate partner violence. Between 2022 and 2023, the center responded to 107 cases of acute intimate partner violence and 234 cases of sexual violence in the emergency departments of those two hospitals. And in that same year-and-a-half period, 140 survivors of acute intimate partner violence accessed the center services for counseling, as did 50 victims of acute sexual violence. And the final statistic that speaks to the very nature of intimate partner violence and the challenge of combating this complex problem is that nationally,
between 30 and 70% of victims do not seek help. So if even 30 more victims came forward, how significant would this issue be for the city of Cambridge? Next slide.
If you could move to slide 8. The recommendation of the inquest jury was to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. The Webster Dictionary defines epidemic as affecting or trending to affect disproportionately large numbers of individuals within a population, community, or region at the same time. The statistics that were just presented would show that the Cambridge experience make it clear that this definition has been met. And as such, we are asking you to make this declaration for the community, for the victims, for the survivors, and for the future. And you're not alone in considering this matter. Landmark County Council was the first to make this declaration December 21st, 2022. And since that time, over 45 municipalities have followed suit, including the City of Ottawa, Durham Region, Burlington City Council, Peel Region, City of Toronto, City of Hamilton, and City of Kitchener. Earlier today, the Region of Waterloo Council carried the motion forward as well. It is our belief the list will only continue to grow. Next slide, please. The benefits of making this declaration by the City of Cambridge are significant. It will serve as a resounding reminder to all victims of intimate partner violence and their family that the Cambridge City Council recognizes their struggle and is here to support them. It will serve as a notice to all offenders that intimate partner violence has no place in the City of Cambridge and that they will be held accountable for their actions. It will be a message of encouragement to all of the employees in the agencies engaged in intimate partner violence work and violence against women work across Cambridge and the region, and that their work is an integral part of the health of this community. It won't cost anything, even though its value will be immense. It will start a conversation locally that will contribute to a movement that is occurring provincially, that being a call to the Ontario provincial government to make this declaration as well.
And then if I could just have the last slide, please. Intimate partner violence thrives in the shadow and in silence. So please help us bring it into the light by joining your voice with so many others as we advocate for change. Thanks so much.
Thank you. You pulled it off in the 10 minutes that you asked for. You had that time. Very, very well done. Can we go to slide 5 or 6 where you talked about the police statistics, please? I just want some clarification on something there. Might be before that. Yes, right there. So you say in the City of Cambridge, are you saying that in the City of Cambridge, the average is 20,870 calls for service? Or are you saying 2,087 plus calls per? I don't understand that statement.
So the 20,000 number is all the calls over a 10-year period from 2012 to 2022, which works out to be an average of 2,087 calls per year. For this item. That's staggering. Yes, that's for domestic intimate partner violence. So it's not all of those calls result in criminal charges. Some of them are verbal arguments, but certainly it's a call that we respond to every single day. And the average of charges laid are over 50%. It looks like there. Could you say? Are some of these calls because other people may have called them in, and do the police lay charges if the partner doesn't want to lay charges? How does that work? So the way it works in Ontario is if the police form reasonable grounds to believe that a criminal offense has been committed, we are obligated to lay a charge. So this takes the onus off of the victim because a lot of times prior to this being in effect for the province of Ontario, the police would ask, would you like a charge laid? And a lot of times the victims would say no, because a lot of their livelihood, their children, everything is focused around this relationship. And so now the way it works is that the police are the ones that lay the charges. If we if we reach reasonable grounds, we don't have any discretion. We have to lay the charge. The courts have different ways that they're able to resolve the charges, but it starts out with a criminal charge if we reach grounds.
Okay, I'm going to ask for questions, so please don't sit down yet. Any questions? Councillor Roberts?
Thank you, Mayor Jan. Thank you all so much for this presentation. Just to echo what Mayor Jan said, these statistics are devastating. I wonder if any of you can speak to, I've often heard that sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional. I feel really attached to this situation. I've had family members affected. Oh, sorry, I didn't think I was gonna. Can you speak to the danger for women when they're trying to leave? I've heard often that that's the most dangerous situation. So perhaps you can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, we often remind people that if they are planning to leave, to make sure to get a safety plan. And that's why it's so important that people reach out to us at Women's Crisis Services so that they have help in a safety plan, because there's so many risk factors and so many unique elements that people need to consider and to get help in doing so, because it's very much the highest risk time. Absolutely.
Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you, Mayor Liggett, and through you. And thank you to Jennifer, Amy, Christine, and Lisa for sticking it out through the entire council session to make it to the end. Really appreciate it. And thank you for your excellent presentation, of course. My question would have to do, it surrounds if you're the average Cambridge resident, this is obviously prevalent across our community. It's going on behind closed doors. Many people aren't aware of it. It could be happening next door. We're not quite sure. If we want to bring these numbers down, what can the average Cambridge resident do? Is it talk about it? Is it what can we do as residents to help reduce these numbers and make people safer?
So we do have a program in place right now that started last year, and it's an early intervention program. And we're the Waterloo Regional Police Intimate Partner Violence Branch is paired up with Women's Crisis Services, and we review the intimate partner violence calls every single day. They're reviewed by a couple different people, sometimes for content, but in this case, they're only reviewed to find out who the involved parties are. And if those involved parties have reached 2 intimate partner violence reports in a 2-month span, then the women's crisis worker and one of our detectives will reach out to this couple. These are ones where there haven't been grounds for criminal charges, and we're trying to intervene before we get to that point. So they're offered supports, counseling, and they're also given information as to what happens if the police reach reasonable grounds. And obviously, the goal is to not lay charges, but to educate and to prevent it from getting any further.
Thank you.
Councillor Kimson?
Thank you, Mayor Jan, and for you to the presenters. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to add another piece, which is I think just to keep the conversation going, that this isn't a private matter, that this is something that affects all of us and affects the community deeply. And the more we talk about it, we're willing to be open about it and say, it's not okay. This is a community issue. It's not just a family private issue. The more we send that message, the more willing people will be to seek help and to help their neighbors when they need it. So
thank you.
Councillor Kimson?
Thank you, Mayor Jan. Thank you for your presentation this evening and for answering all of our questions. you touched on it briefly during the presentation, but I'm wondering if you can speak to how this affects people of all genders and not just women, because I would expect that perhaps there may be some people who are even more hesitant to come forward due to perhaps being in a different type of situation. If we can speak to that.
I would add that this is very much a gendered issue. It does disproportionately impact women, typically about 85%. I know for our services, we are inclusive in regards to supporting trans, gender diverse individuals. We're also talking a lot as a project as to how do we engage men, both men as allies and also men that is struggling with abusive behavior but wants to make changes. So it's definitely part of what we're looking at, but it is very much a disproportionate issue in terms of a gender specific issue.
Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. Yeah, thanks for what you have to say here. There's some eye-opening numbers here. I'm just wondering, please tell me if I'm wrong here. I'm just wondering, do these numbers, do they go up with general kind of widespread pressures that people feeling? I guess I'm referring to, say, the pandemic, and then since then the ensuing, the massive cost of living, housing issues. Have you seen these numbers go up in that time?
I'll take that one. So what we do see is that the prevention efforts we focus on aren't as effective when there's so many complexities of strain. So when you have financial challenges, when you have a housing challenges, when you have employment challenges, it's much like people are under so much strain that some of the preventative efforts we do, we're in the mild to moderate counseling business. So Porch Light, for example, in Cambridge works in partnership with us. But what we see is after the pandemic, we saw a drastic increase in relationship conflict. That was the biggest increase that we saw. Of course, people are working at home together. We're shut down. But the old measures we used aren't as effective. We have to keep adapting our approaches and just really pivoting to what the new need is. And there's a lot of conflict happening. There's conflict, you all know this. Conflict happening, generational conflict, parent-child conflict, partner conflict, employment conflict, housing conflict. Like it's a real big focus. That's what we've seen. And that's all precursors to intimate family violence and intimate partner violence.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thanks for what you're doing, what you're trying to bring attention to. Thank you.
I like that it's called intimate partner violence because, as we all know, sometimes it happens to men as well. And it's more difficult for them to prove that it's not them being the violent one, and then they lose visitation rights and custody of their children, and having had family members who have had to go through that and then finally been able to prove that it wasn't them, it was actually coming from the female. I really, really appreciate the fact that it says intimate partner violence at the same time as showing how prevalent this is for women in our community, that they're the victims of this. So thank you so much for all the work that you do, as well as the ladies sitting in the audience, because I know you're part of all of this. So I appreciate everything that all of you are doing, and the people of this community, thank you as well. So thank you. Councillor Hamilton, you have the motion. Did you want to put it on the floor? Oh, another delegation. I'm sorry. Oh, Kim, you're going to get up and speak. I was thanking you too soon there.
Mayor Liggett, members of council, I'm Kim Decker, and I'm the CEO of YWCA Cambridge, an organization was providing responsive programming and services to women, girls, and gender diverse individuals in Cambridge for 75 years. I'm here to express my and YWCA Cambridge's support for Councillor Scott Hamilton's motion for Cambridge to declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. Carol Culleton was 66 in 2015 before she was killed by Basil Bardutsky, who was known to her, who scared her, and whose repeated advances she rejected. Days after she told him once again to leave her alone and that she has a boyfriend, Basil killed her in her home. Anastasia Kuzik was 36 in 2015 when she was killed by that same man on the same day. Their relationship had ended when he was sentenced to 17 months in prison after being found guilty of physically assaulting Anastasia. Upon release, Basil was ordered to attend a partner assault response program, to which he never showed. Natalie Warmadem was 48. She lived in fear of Basil since the relationship ended 3 years prior. After months of abuse, including physical violence and death threats, she reported him to police and he was sentenced to 150 days in jail, but then he was released. He was ordered to attend a partner assault response counseling program, but once again, he never attended. Natalie was so afraid of Basil, she regularly wore a panic button that would alert police of her presence when she pressed it, and she kept a gun beside her bed. The most striking thing about the tragedy of these deaths is how preventable they all were. Each of these women feared Basil. He was known in the community to be violent and erratic. There were countless red flags, and yet the system failed. It failed to keep these women safe, and it failed to adequately address Basil's years-long history of violence against women. Following an inquest into the Renfrew triple femicide, the jury produced 86 recommendations. These recommendations point to a systemic underfunding of frontline supports and glaring gaps in the justice system. They also point to the need to reframe the public understanding of and government response to an insidious, often hidden experience, one that has far-reaching consequences. At YWCA Cambridge, we've seen firsthand the consequences of underfunding of frontline supports, including upstream prevention work. We provided free gender-based violence prevention programming with youth for more than 10 years with no core funding support. Well, the pandemic brought on a troubling increase in GBV and led to increased demand for our in-school violence prevention program. We can't secure adequate funding from any level of government or funder to begin addressing long wait lists. Meanwhile, we're hearing from school administrators and child and youth workers that violent and discriminatory behaviors among youth is only getting worse. It's well known that IPV and GBV more broadly is on the rise, and that more often than not, it's men perpetuating violence against women. It's also known that IPV and GBV have significant impacts not only on the emotional and mental well-being of survivors and their families, but also on the economy. It's estimated that domestic violence costs employers in Canada $78 million annually. And a recent survey, 71% of Canadian employers reported needing to support an employee with a domestic violence situation. Beyond workplace impacts, GBV and IPV place economic strain on our healthcare and justice system. In 2009 alone, the economic impact of spousal violence in Canada was $7.4 billion. In contrast, achieving gender equity, of which GBV and IPV is a crucial step, has the potential to add $12 trillion to global growth. To achieve a thriving economy locally, provincially, and federally, tackling GBV and IPV must be a priority for all levels of government. It's my hope that this council will see the importance and the urgency in joining the dozens of municipalities across the province in declaring IPV an epidemic, and that you request the province to do the same. Ending IPV and GBV requires all levels of government to first acknowledge the problem and then commit to addressing it. I worked in a shelter over 40 years ago, and I said it then and I will say it now. We need to stop thinking of IPV as a private matter and start talking about the public benefits of investing in things like violence prevention, increased frontline supports to respond to the violence, and public education. We all have a shared goal of building a thriving community. One critical way of achieving that is by tackling two of the worst impediments to women, girls, and gender diverse individuals' potential: gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Are there any questions from any members of council? Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Leggett, and through you. And thank you very much, Kim, for coming and lasting the whole evening to delegate. Much appreciated. Can you speak a little bit more about how IPV and GBV affects the YWCA, trends you're seeing, issues even with staff? How does it affect you and your organization locally?
Yeah, Thank you. I guess a couple of things. We do a number of programs for women. So often we're dealing with historical trauma that women have faced years before coming to the work that we do. So often going back and finding counseling and supports for them to be able to deal with things that happened to them maybe 10 or 20 years ago when they didn't feel comfortable coming forward or going to a shelter for assistance. The other thing that I mentioned that we do a significant amount of work on is around gender-based violence prevention with young folks. So we do prevention work with kids starting as young as 8 years old, because we do believe, as the earlier delegation mentioned, that it's an important conversation that needs to happen across groups in the community. Not only women, but men and boys need to be a part of a conversation, as do young folks, as do gender diverse folks. So I think that's the role that we play. We see increasing violence in schools and are often called in to do some of that in-school programming work. So that's where our interest lies in this issue.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Councillor Hamilton, could you put the motion on the floor, please?
Mayor Liggett, and through you, it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Kimpson. Recommendation, whereas the safety of our community and its members is of extreme importance to every single Cambridge resident, as well as to Cambridge Council. Whereas intimate partner violence, often referred to as domestic violence, means any use of physical or sexual force, actual or threatened in an intimate relationship, including emotional and/or psychological abuse or harassing behavior, and persons of any gender or sex can be victims of intimate partner violence. Whereas Waterloo Region is experiencing a rise in intimate partner violence, IPV, and domestic violence during and after the COVID-19 pandemic, and the Waterloo Region Police Service, the WRPS, experiences an average of 17 calls related to IPV per day, with a total of 6,158 calls in 2022 and 66,000 calls for service in total, despite the fact that 70% of IPV incidents go unreported due to feelings of shame, fear, and secrecy. Whereas the WRPS has laid more than 35,000 charges related to IPV, or an average of 3,500 per year. Whereas in 2022, 5 out of the 6 homicides in Waterloo Region stemmed from IPV and domestic violence, with over 3,800 criminal charges issued by the WRPS in relation to IPV. Whereas between 2012 and 2022, the WRPS received a total of 20,870 calls related to IPV in Cambridge and laid a total of 11,020 charges related to IPV in Cambridge. Whereas Indigenous women are approximately 3.5 times more likely to experience some form of intimate partner violence than non-Indigenous women, and the homicide rate for Indigenous women and girls is approximately 6 times higher than for non-Indigenous women and girls, and Indigenous women are 12 times more likely to be murdered or missing than any other women in Canada, and 16 times more likely than white women. Whereas violence against women costs the national justice system, healthcare systems, social service agencies, and municipalities billions of dollars per year, and municipalities are on the front lines in addressing gender-based violence. Be it resolved that the City of Cambridge joins over 30 other Ontario municipalities in supporting the recommendation number 1 from the Coolidge, Cusick, and Warmerdam inquest, the CKW inquest, in formally declaring intimate partner violence, IPV, as an epidemic. And that the province of Ontario be requested to declare that intimate partner violence and violence against women is an epidemic in accordance with recommendation number 1 of the CKW inquest. And that Cambridge recommends that Waterloo Regional Council integrates intimate partner violence into the region's community safety and wellbeing plan in accordance with the recommendation number 10 of the CKW inquest, and set out gender-based violence and intimate partner violence as a separate priority within the plan. And further, that the city clerk be directed to send a copy of this motion to the region of Waterloo, the province of Ontario, the Right Honourable Prime Minister, members of Parliament, provincial members of Parliament, the United Nations, and all other Ontario municipalities. And if I may speak to the motion, please. Thank you, Mayor Liggett. So these are staggering numbers that we just heard. The reason they came about, and I want to bring this motion forward, was actually conversations I had with Councillor Reid when she was in the hospital. And Councillor Reid was the original seconder of this motion. I thank Councillor Kimpson for stepping up after Donna's tragic passing. And the question we asked, because we seem to be talking a lot about community safety in Cambridge, is if we look to the numbers, what is the biggest community safety issue we seem to have? And we spoke with police, and we were astonished to see that a lot of the biggest safety concerns affecting Cambridge residents happen behind closed doors, and they happen in neighborhoods. They might even be happening next door to any of us. So we were just shocked at the prevalence of this across our city and across the province and across the country. So why are we doing this? Because it's not our jurisdiction. We are a city council. This is something we can ask of the region, and we're asking of the province. I won't go through every single reason that the delegates very eloquently expressed as to why we should lend our support to this. But most importantly, I think we need to recognize that 70% of Cambridge residents that are suffering from this aren't coming forward. And we as a council need to show them that we support them, we care for them, and they're able to talk about it. They're able to seek help, and there are agencies all around them, many of them that are here tonight, where they can go to get that help. We need to make sure it's public and it's safe to talk about, and that people know there are places to go and they know where to go to get that help. We need to band together with other municipalities to make that appeal to the province to help these agencies, to declare this an epidemic, to give them more funding, because we know there's a problem on the ground, and we know we need to take significant action in any way possible to address it. So even though we are a municipality, we're appealing to another level of government, I think there's strength in numbers. And this is something we certainly need as much strength as possible together to combat. So I thank every single delegate that came to speak tonight, and thank you all for your work throughout the community, helping so many of us out there that are suffering. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. I just want to comment on something. Many times elected officials are accused of doing things and with no real intent behind them, and it's considered virtue signaling. And while that may be true many times, I have to say in this instance, thank you, Councillor Hamilton, for bringing this forward. This is not virtual signaling. This is not one of those times. This is a serious problem that we have. And I'm very happy to be voting in support of this. So if nobody else has any comments, I'm going to ask for a call for the vote.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
Our next order of business is the motion to receive, and Councillor Earnshaw, you have the motion.
Thank you, Mayor Leggett. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Kimson that all presentations and correspondence from the September 12, 2023 council meeting be received.
Thank you, Councillor Earnshaw. I'll ask the clerk to call for the vote.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries.
Our next order of business is the consideration of bylaws. Councillor Kimson, you have the motion. Could you please read it?
Thank you, Mayor Jan. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Earnshaw. Recommendation that the following bylaws listed under the heading of Introduction and Consideration of Bylaws be enacted and passed. 23-061 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 6-13 to require owners of buildings of certain classes in the municipality to connect the said buildings to the sewage service or water service of the municipality and to restrict the use of septic tanks. 23-074 being a bylaw to exempt certain lots or blocks pursuant to subsection 50(5) of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP13 as amended, part lot control exemption, blocks 119, 120, 121, and 122 on registered plan 58M 696. 23-075 being a bylaw to adopt amendment number 62 of the City of Cambridge Official Plan 2012 as amended with respect to land municipally known as 499 Dundas Street North. 23 076 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 150 85 as amended with respect to land municipally known as 499 Dundas Street North. 23 077 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 150 85 as amended with respect to permitting additional residential units. 23 078 being a bylaw to adopt amendment number 68 of the City of Cambridge Official Plan 2012 as amended with respect to additional residential units.
Thank you, Councillor Kimpson. I will ask the clerk to call for the vote now.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
Councillor Earnshaw, you have the motion for the confirmatory bylaw. Could you please read it?
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Roberts that bylaw 23-079, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Cambridge, be passed.
Thank you. I'll ask the clerk to call for the vote.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries unanimously.
Thank you. Councillor Earnshaw, you carried the heavy load of doing motions tonight. So if you could please bring forward the heaviest one of all, the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mayor Liggett. It's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Cooper that the council meeting does now adjourn at 8:39 p.m.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, vote, sorry. I'm sorry. Just long day. That's good. That's good. Call for the vote.
Starting voting. And closing voting. And that carries.